congratulations on the album. I've had a chance to sit down and take a listen to it, and it's an absolutely amazing album, so congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm happy with it myself, I have to say. It's sometimes I'm surprising myself that after 19 albums there's something coming out that I enjoy so much. It's a surprise to myself as well.
Now, the last couple of years has been such a weird place for the world because we've been in lockdowns and things like that, but that gave you so much more time to work on this album. Is that something that you really noticed when you were working on the album, how much extra time you had to actually sit down and work on it?
Yeah, it was definitely a factor, because it was not so much that I enjoyed the time itself. I mean, I'm not socializing a lot, so it didn't make much of a difference, going out. But the whole world outside, you could see the economy suffer and people going crazy, and people with masks and people without masks, and everybody against everybody. It was a weird time, and of course there was always the question, will there be a business left once we're done with this?
Yep.
Will we ever be done with this in the first place? So, but apart from that, it also took a weight off my shoulders, because the world outside was asleep, and for the first time in my life, nobody was bothering me and asking me like, oh, where's the new album due? Oh, when you're going to do this, when you're going to do that. Everybody was busy with their own problems, and I had nothing else to do. I had just built a studio in my house, which at first I thought was a weird idea because I didn't know about COVID. But when COVID came, I said, okay, now the world is fucked. There's not going to be a business anymore, and you have your own pretty expensive studio now. But then it turned out to be a blessing because, as I said, there was nothing else to do, and I could start working on real small details, and I rediscovered a very, very strong and tight relationship with the basics of being a musician.
Yeah.
And that's something, there was no business, and nothing mattered anymore. I was there, I was doing demos from start to finish. I rediscovered the joy of singing, because all of a sudden I didn't have to sing. In the past I was singing a lot because I had to record, I had to tour, I had to play a festival. But now it was just, okay, I'm going to sing some Journey songs just for the love of singing them sometimes.
Yep.
And stuff like that. So yes, it was a very creative time, even though of course it was not, the perspective was not really good. But I tried to ignore that and disappear in my own little Club Toby world. And that's what the album is about in a way as well.
And how much of a difference did it make having the studio at home? Because I know for myself, I'd been working in radio for 20 years and I'd been doing traveling into the studio every day to record shows, to record podcasts. Suddenly I had a studio at home and I found that everything freed up in my life. If I wanted to record a podcast at 3 a.m. in the morning, I could do it. I didn't have that time of, no, you can only be in the studio for this certain amount of time. Is that something that you found as well, having the studio at home?
Everything is very it's much more liberating in a way. Liberating, is that the right word? I mean,
liberating, yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Liberating, not liberating. Yeah, liberating. Okay, there was one T too much. And it was, of course, it's you have much more freedom. You spend much more time on rails. In the past, I mean, I had done the Moonflower album in my own studio as well, but it wasn't a studio. It was a different studio. I had really changed everything to make the room sonically much, much better. I had a real proper studio building company tear half of the basement apart and create a great sounding environment, a haven, so to speak. And of course, that's a huge difference. In the past, I would go to Sasha's place 3 times a week. And that meant, I mean, for you in Australia, you have a different relation to distances and traveling. Because when you say it's the next city, it usually means it's like a 12 hours drive.
Yeah.
In Germany, the next city is usually a 1 hour drive.
Yeah.
But it is, still it was, to me, it was a lot of stress because it took me 3 hours to get to Sasha's place and 3 hours back. And I would most of the time not even stay overnight, which meant I got up at 6 o'clock, went to Sasha's place, worked there for 6 hours, and went back and came home late at night. And that 3 times a week.
Yep.
Sometimes 2 times a week. And you spend so much time in trains, on trains. I mean, I enjoy trains. But I know that route. I know it so well. I know every single fucking tree and every single fucking cow and every single sheep on the way to Sasha's place. At some point, I couldn't enjoy the joy of traveling by train anymore. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a good example is I wrote this song, Welcome to the Shadows, which was inspired by John Carpenter. I told it in some interviews already. It was inspired by John Carpenter. I woke up in front of my TV. There was John Carpenter's Christine on. And I thought, oh, what a great, brilliant idea to use all these cheap vintage synthesizer sounds and orchestrate them to a beautiful, orchestrated, very creepy, eerie soundtrack.
Yep.
And I heard it and I thought, that's inspiring. And I got up, that was 1 o'clock at night, 1 a.m. I got up from my couch, went to the studio, and started to modify vintage synthesizer sounds that I had.
Wow.
And started to play around with it. And I stayed in the studio until the next morning, I think at 10 o'clock or something, and worked on Welcome to the Shadows. And, the song literally wrote itself. And I would have never, I was in the right mood to reap that idea. I was in the right mood to be creative.
Yep.
And if it would have taken me to go to a studio that is 300 kilometers away, I don't know what would have happened to my ideas and my passion and my creative mood on the way to Sasha's place. Probably by the time I would have arrived, I would have even forgotten about what I wanted to do and why I got there in the first place.
Yep.
So it is much more creative, yeah.
You talked a little bit there about John Carpenter. I've got to say his music has held up so well. I just saw Halloween Ends the other night, and they use a lot of his music from the original film, and it still holds up so well. But I understand you also took some inspiration from some of the music that you love from the 80s as well with this album.
Absolutely. With every album. Being creative as an artist, a lot of artsy-fartsy artists describe it as a super magical process. No, it's actually hard work, and I think it's just what we do as artists, and I think that's valid for pretty much every artist. It's not hocus pocus, it's just a combination of what inspires you, and it becomes a melange of what you do after. It becomes a melange, and after you process it with your thoughts and your experience and your skills and your view on the world and your take on things, you process it to your own. But still, it's a combination of what inspired you in the first place. And that's always been the case. I've been a child of the 80s. I'm actually, my first favorite band, and that will always be a love affair for life, was AC/DC. And that's not so much 80s. I'm more into the Bon Scott stuff. I love Brian Johnson, but Bon Scott, that was how I got into AC/DC with Live, If You Want Blood Live. But apart from that, and Kiss was also a big thing for me. But apart from that, I was socialized musically during the 80s. And there was, no matter if it was Bon Jovi or Halloween or Iron Maiden, Journey, Def Leppard, it's everything 80s. Ronnie James Dio, big influence. And also, but I didn't appreciate it back then, but also pop music of the 80s. Today I appreciate it a lot. Maybe I'm getting old and merciful with age, that you look back at those times and you listen to old 80s pop music and you think, that's actually pretty great songwriting, pretty great song. Aha, for example.
Yeah.
Funnily, have just released a record themselves in the same day that I did. So I love the sound aesthetics of the 80s. Whereas Sasha, my co-producer, I don't want to say he hates the 80s, but he's so much more into the 70s. And that's we always argue about which era was better for music and gave birth to better bands and better music. We still haven't found an objective conclusion, but I think the 80s. I prefer the 80s. Let's put it this way.
Definitely. I'm the same. Like, I've realized recently how much, because when at the end of the year Spotify tells you how many listens you've had per song and how many listens you've had per genre, I've noticed over the last 5 or 6 years, the bands that I've been listening to a lot are the bands that I was listening to back in the 80s when I was growing up, and I've been listening to that so much more than I have other music. I think it's something that happens when you reach my age. You go back to the music that inspired you when you were younger.
Absolutely, and it's also got something to do with nostalgia. And I can discover that with myself, I just ordered a 300 euros box set of Kiss, Creatures of the Night. I have Creatures of the Night in 7 different formats, but I just do it for the joy of traveling back to my childhood once again with a new format for 300 euros. It's a 300 euro ticket to my past.
Yeah.
So I think it's basically. I also suffer from it as a musician. I have to admit it, because a lot of people say, "Okay, Toby, everything you've done past your first 2 Avantasia albums is not as good. It doesn't stand up to it." And but I think I cannot compete with my past, and I don't want to compete with my past because it's a soundtrack of many people's and many fans' lives. It's part of the soundtrack, at least.
Yeah.
And of course, even for myself, when I listen to the first Avantasia album, I go, okay, it's funny. I wouldn't do it like this day. It doesn't represent me as a musician. And if an alien came one day and knocked at my door and said, "Play me something that is representative for your music," you're often asked that question as an artist, which is strange. What kind of song would you play? What kind of your own songs would you play to an alien to show him anything about you and your band?
Yeah.
Or something about you and your band? It's a very unlikely scenario, I believe. So that's why I never really think about it. But now that I think about it, I would not play them the first records, but I understand why people hold them in so close to their hearts. It's a strange question to ask somebody, what would you play to an alien if you wanted to show him what your band is all about? It's the same question like, which records would you take with you? Which 3 records would you take with you to a desert island?
Yep.
Well, that's a very unlikely scenario. Why would I think about taking 3 records to a desert island that doesn't even have batteries or power or a CD player or an LP player? It's an unlikely scenario, highly unlikely, way too unlikely to think about it.
Definitely. Now, talking of silly questions, I know the last time I interviewed you, I asked you the question if there are any artists out there that you wanted to work with that you hadn't worked with, and one of the answers that you gave me was that you wanted to work with the guys from Nightwish, and that happens on this album. Tell us a little bit about how that happened and what it was like to work with Floor.
Well, I used to work with Marco Hietala before on the Ghost Lights album. That's why I'm not sure I said that I wanted to work with a guy. But anyway, maybe I don't know what the conversation was about exactly. But
I think it was. I think we were talking about vocalists, and you said that you wanted to work with Floor at some stage.
Okay, yeah, that may be possible. I mean, I have known Floor for quite a while, and I knew she's a. We didn't know each other too well, but we moved in the same studio recording environment all the time because she was working with Stasha as well when she was in After Forever. He produced their all their records, so she was working in the same studio, and we were moving in the same circles. And we had met a couple of times backstage at festivals when she was in After Forever. And I thought, at some point, because I think she's the best thing that could have happened tonight, was she's such a classy singer, such a versatile singer. I thought it would be great to work with Flo because she can contribute something. She's a very, very good and very colored singer with many different facets in her voice. Facet or facet?
Facet, yep.
Facet, yeah. And I talked to Sasha, and Sasha said, "Oh, she's wonderful in the studio. Also, she's technically so great. It's amazing to work with her. She's got a lot of power, and she's got a good pop appeal also." So I said, "Okay, we have to ask her." I asked her, and I sent her the song "Misplaced Among the Angels" first, which was a leftover of the previous album session, the Moonglow sessions. Because we already had so many songs, and I said, okay, let's take this song out. It's a great song for the future, without the lyrics back then. And I sent Flo the song, and she said, "Oh, it's a good song, but I'm not sure it's my range. Don't you have anything else?" I said, "Okay, I'm going to write you something. Give me a few days." And I wrote "Kill the Pain Away." And she sang it in her own studio. And when she got back to me and said, "Oh, it's a beautiful track, I've recorded it," and she said, "By the way, Toby, I have recorded the other track as well," because I went through it again and again, and I thought, actually, to my surprise, it works really well with my voice. So I just sent them both. It was great fun. I think that was also because it was the pandemic, right? And everybody was sitting at home, and I think some people, I think even Flo, had even begun to record cover songs in their own studio because there was nothing else to do. We were going crazy. Yep. We were like trapped animals, all of us. We were sitting at home thinking, what can I do? Should I do a podcast? Should I do a do-it-yourself vacuum cleaning tutorial? Well, do-it-yourself vacuum cleaning tutorial doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. Everybody was sitting at home wondering, like, okay, what can I do? Paul Stanley sitting there with an acoustic guitar going through Love Gun, a guitar tutorial through Love Gun. Everything was becoming surreal. We were all sitting at home trying to keep ourselves sane and busy. And probably that's the reason also why Flo said, okay, I said, if I sent her the whole album, maybe she would have sung the whole album. Because we were all starving to do something that made sense.
Definitely. Well, Toby, I know that we are running out of time very, very quickly, so I guess to finish off again, I want to say congratulations on such an amazing album. And is there anything you would like to say to your fans out there before they sit down and take a listen to this album in its entirety?
Oh, I hope they enjoy it as much as I enjoyed putting it together. It's been great, but I'm completely aware that I didn't reinvent the wheel. I don't care. It's a very, very heartfelt album, and I hope people appreciate it as much as I appreciated putting it together. And yeah, enjoy it. And thanks for your support. And hopefully see you all at a show. We're trying to make it work to come back to Australia. I can't promise anything, but yeah. But until then, enjoy the album, and thanks for your support. And thanks for not forgetting about this little German guy who loves Australia a lot.